Welcome to XReality podcast. I am the host, Dominic Wu. Each week, we will have conversations with industry leaders to explore the unexpected connections and opportunities between diverse sectors and world of spatial AI and XR. Today, our guest is Steve McCloskey, CEO of Nano. Steve is transforming how people interact with science through immersive technology by working towards a future where technology and science intersect seamlessly, making research and discovery more accessible. At Nanome, he leads a dynamic team of professionals on a journey to become a go-to platform for molecule design, ensuring that scientists and the researchers have tools that need to change the world for the better. Okay, so yeah, thank you, Steve, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was a really nice intro. I mean, yeah, building the future of science and making it easier for people to get into that and yeah, help make better technology, better medicine, all of that.
Yeah, yeah, and I also tried Nano in the past, and I put Nano into my book as one of the really good examples for how like scientists jump into the VR or mixed reality right now to collaborate with other scientists. So can you share with us what's your journey for being where you are today?
Yeah, yeah. It actually starts pretty far back. So just a small anecdote of my first time trying virtual reality. So I was at Six Flags Magic Mountain in Los Angeles. Growing up as a kid, this was in the 90s. I was like 6 or 7 years old, and they had a like an exhibit where it looked kind of cyberpunk, kind of like the Cybertruck. It was very angular, and you walk inside, and there was this huge helmet and like a little platform, and I saw it, and I'm like, I really, really, really want to try that. Like, it looks so cool. And so yeah, I'm this little kid with this big helmet on, and I go through and I play Pac-Man, and that memory stuck with me like throughout all of childhood. Like I played other video games on PlayStation, Nintendo, but it was never really immersive. And so it was always like magic to me because I didn't really understand that experience because I couldn't have another one playing video games. But really it was when the Oculus Kickstarter came out that I thought back and I was like, okay, virtual reality, like the Oculus is supposed to be an accessible version where you could actually have it in your house. That sounds awesome. So I was following the Kickstarter with Palmer Luckey and everything happening at the time. And I ended up ordering the developer kit in 2014 with the idea of like wanting to get hands-on with molecules because I was a nano engineer at UC San Diego and I was really frustrated at the interface. A lot of 2D mouse and keyboard clicking and dragging and trying to do things in 3D was very difficult. You didn't have 6-degree freedom input. So I was playing with different stereo glasses and things like that. But then I got the developer kit. And I was like, this is it. This is amazing. I looked at the little plant on the table and could see the 3D of the fern in the example scene. And I was just like, this is it. This is how it needs to be. Like imagine that was molecules. And I started building prototypes and kind of hacking on it by myself. That was challenging. I think being a solo VR developer is like very hard in today's standards, but there was like nothing there back then. You had the Oculus SDK, but you didn't really have much beyond that. So from there, I got a bunch of friends together. Sam, our CTO, was a good friend of mine from the rugby team at UCSD. Got a couple other co-founders together and started making the prototypes better and better. Started engaging with more scientists, getting them to use the platform. We worked with Novartis in San Diego and kept improving it around drug discovery. And yeah, we kept doing that. And how the software is really, really mature now. A lot of scientists use it around the world. We helped out a lot with the COVID-19 pandemic, different people studying the proteins of the coronavirus, different people coming up with new molecules. We even designed a few ourselves. But yeah, we help out with a ton of areas, not just biotech and pharmaceuticals. We help out with a little bit of material science, really everything at the nanoscale, which is how the company's name came about, right? The omics of nano. So like everything that is really, really small, atoms, molecules, proteins, different material structures, really everything below 100 nanometers is our focus.
Wow, yeah, and I tried Nano in the past with like a John was leading the team, and he showed us like some like a wiggling like a
Mhm.
molecules, and I find out that is amazing to visualize not only the form but also the behavior. You can do it, and also you can collaborate with your teams. And I really love the way that you when you grab the molecule and you are the presenter. I think that is a brilliant idea. Yeah. So yeah, can you tell us a little bit about because you mentioned that you start purchasing the Oculus SDK and you become the starter of developing it, while your background is nano engineer or bioengineer. How can you do this, but also like play around with the technology? And I remember at the beginning, the first generation of Oculus, it might take a lot of technology types of skills. How can you overcome those obstacles to create your first prototype?
Yeah, well, I think now it's much easier to create prototypes, and you don't ever need to code, or you don't need to use Unity. You could even like build on top of another application that's for prototyping. So think about like spatial, where you go in and we use spatial just to ideate like different user interfaces and come up with that. But yeah, at the time I had a little bit of background in Python and a little bit of background in C, like not C++, not C sharp, like just C. Um, and I had been around computers my whole life and was somewhat familiar with things. So I started with actual game engines. Microsoft had some game engines where I was trying to do some stuff in 2D. But when the Oculus came out, really Unity was the go-to game development engine. And so I started using Unity. And at the end of the day, Unity is easy and hard. Like you could drag some objects in, you could build out some molecules and kind of make a prototype scene pretty easily. But then, scripting, like be building a parser so that you could read in new data for scientists is much harder than having a pre-baked molecule. So there's like different levels of prototypes you could get to. But yeah, I, learned a bit of C sharp. Uh, it's a fine language. Like, yeah, you could always teach yourself and learn things. And now that ChatGPT is out, you could actually get a lot further by using a code assistant, whether it's Copilot, ChatGPT, Claude, right? There's a ton out there where you could tell it what you want it to do, and it'll actually give you the code. So like that's amazing. But yeah, things like that didn't exist. And so yeah, I basically got friends together to help me out to help supplement, some the lack of the skills because I, knew the science, I knew what I wanted to do, get hands-on with the molecules, and some of the code. I actually did a bit of Fortran as well. Fortran, man, it's its own beast. But yeah, all the backend simulations I understood, pretty well because it was all like formulas and mathematics and like putting that into code. But everything on the user interface side needed successive iterations and development to get to where we are today. And I don't think I could do it as a solo person. That I'm not the best programmer. Like I can, do what I need to do. But yeah, getting friends with a deeper knowledge of computer science and human computer interaction and like user design was critical. Because you definitely need a team to make a compelling VR experience work together.
Yeah, and can you share with us a little bit about what do you see the opportunities that needs XR creators to jump in and potentially help the pharmaceutical or bioengineering or vaccine design? What types of what to your eyes, what types of opportunities that the creators can jump in?
Yeah, so we have the privilege of working with a lot of really big biotech and pharmaceutical companies, and they're not just using virtual reality for Nanome and exploring molecular design. They're also exploring instrumentation. How would the layout of this new lab look if I had all these new machines? or using it to classify three-dimensional data sets. So if you have like a neuron that you have a 3D image of, like classifying that neuron through a bunch of 2D slices on a mouse and keyboard is very mundane and there's a lot of errors. But when you have it in VR, you're able to just kind of like draw a line and be like, all right, the neuron starts here and it ends there. It's straightforward, very obvious what's going on. So I think that there's a lot of other use cases outside of what we do that could still help out in biotech and pharmaceuticals. And it just depends like how far down the line you are. Like we work with the very early stage research and development before these molecules are going into animals, or before they're going into people. So there's a lot of changes that you might make to that molecule. But yeah, I think VR, being used on the equipment side, the lab side, a ton of different things happening on that area as well.
Yeah, so can you share with us like some of your use cases for Nano, how scientists jump in and create something that they wouldn't be able with the 2D monitors, or like the if they didn't choose Nano, they might not be able to create an amazing project. Do you have any the study case?
Yeah, we have a few case studies on our website. One of them is with Nimbus Therapeutics. So Nimbus Therapeutics, they have a protein target. So the way a lot of drug development works is you have a protein target. So protein is you have RNA and DNA, which is a string of information. And then that gets encoded into another string of information called a protein or an amino acid sequence. So it goes from DNA or RNA, which is nucleic acids, and then those get translated biologically into amino acids. And so when you have a string of amino acids, instead of being a straight line, it actually folds into 3D shape. And so when it folds into 3D shape, it kind of has like a pocket. And a lot of drug development is trying to find something that fits exactly into that pocket. People use the analogy that you have a lock and you're trying to design a key that fits into the lock. Other people say it's like, finding the right dancing partner that like complements because these things are actually like moving, which, these things are moving. So there's a lot of analogies, but yeah, you have this moving lock and you need to design a three-dimensional moving key that interacts with it spatially, that interacts with it chemically, right? You have to have the right chemical interactions. And so by combining the spatial understanding as well as the back-end compute to understand things like chemical interactions, you're able to see all this information very immediately. It becomes immediately obvious what's going on. So Nimbus Therapeutics had their molecules that they were working on in 2D, and they made the designs and they said, okay, this is looking pretty good. Let's synthesize this, let's test it. And when you synthesize and test, you're looking at thousands, tens of thousands of dollars. Like this could be pretty expensive depending on how complex it is, what types of tests you're doing. If it's a simple assay that's well known, it might be cheaper. But if it's a more complex custom assay, as in like a testing bed to see physically if these things are binding to your protein in real life or not, that could be very expensive. So you want to make sure that these drugs are, or these drug candidates, these chemicals are in the best shape before actually getting them synthesized. And you do that through computational methods as well as human analysis. So the scientist that we worked with, he went into virtual reality after he already ordered the compounds and said, all right, I'm just going to double check and make sure. And so he goes in and he sees immediately, oh, I thought I was building out into this direction of the pocket, but I was actually building out into that direction. That's never going to work. And this is something where in 2D, he kept looking at it and he thought it was one way, but in virtual reality, you just immediately see that it's not that. So I think with VR, it allows you to get to the ground truth of these three-dimensional interactions, or really four-dimensional because they're moving, uh, pretty immediately. And we've heard a million times from different people that spent, 5, 6 years in their PhD working with a single protein structure. And they go into Nanome and they say, oh my God, I can't believe this is there. Like I looked at this for years and I never saw
Wow.
that. We've heard that countless times at conferences and different interactions that we've had with these scientists. Like they love their protein and they think they know it in and out like the back of their hand, but then they go into VR and they discover something new. So yeah, I
Oh.
just love it when people see that.
Wow, that's amazing and lovely, like a way of how you visualize and make it so tangible. And the scientists can grab and can measure and can be inside or be outside, just to look at the micro and macro scales and measure all the distance. I think this is amazing. And also, before I did my Skillshare, because we have a lot of like a small workshops, like a hackathon styles, and I saw Unity has Sentis AI, and one of their examples is amino acid. They do a lot of AI simulations for amino acids to predict how the folding, what's the
Yeah.
angle. Yeah, because of that project, I dive into and take a look to see what's amino acid. And I
Yeah.
find out actually that is a very important types of ways for scientists to predict such as Alzheimer or other disease. So I think AI and XR definitely can help a lot of science to I would say find out a lot of different cures for something that before there's no cures.
Mhm.
So is there any like other examples that you think AI or AI and VR or XR can help? For example, predicting how amino acid folding or any other ways for scientists to save their like the time laboring time to figure out the structure. What do you see XR or XR AI to help with kind of like accelerating this process?
Yeah, it definitely democratizes the ability to target a new protein. So, yeah, the proteins on the RCSB protein data bank, there's like hundreds of thousands of different structures available. And so if you just want to download those, it's pretty easy, pretty straightforward, but those are known targets. Somebody's already crystallized it. The chances are there's other people working on drugs to target that specific protein. But there's a lot of proteins that are, non-crystallized, not deposited on any database with experimental structures. And for those ones, the fact that you could basically start with someone's DNA, so look at genomic data like 23andMe. They have all this data of genomics. It's not a full genomic sequence. It's like
Mm.
a SNP, so it's like a nucleotide profile. It's a smaller amount of information. But even with big patient samplings like that, you can understand, okay, if people have a certain mutation or a certain sequence of DNA, it's associated with this disease. Okay, let's understand the proteins that are actually encoded by that portion of DNA. And you could go from information to 3D structure with just software now, right? AlphaFold, ESMFold, OpenFold, Rosetta Fold, right? There's all these different AI predictive folding softwares. Well, it'll go from information, DNA, RNA, and amino acid sequence, to then folding it into that 3D shape. So that means that you could target a lot of different disease areas that traditionally you'd have to spend a lot of money, a lot of time trying to crystallize that structure experimentally, and only a certain amount of people are able to do that. You need to have a lab, either affiliated with a large company, a big nonprofit research, university, different things like that. You couldn't just be at home using a open source piece of software to fold it and predict it. And once you have that 3D structure, then you could go into applications like Nanome and start to target it and say, okay, if this is the real 3D shape, what if I design a chemical like this? It might not work out 100% of the time. Like these AlphaFold and other folding softwares aren't 100% accurate. And also they're just giving you a snapshot, because these proteins are moving and opening and closing. They're like little machines. Each one kind of has their own purpose. So, you want to combine that with things like molecular dynamics, understand the motion. You were talking about how you went into Nanome and saw the wiggling protein structure,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Yeah, you want to understand the motion of these things. And maybe there's a few snapshots where you start with AlphaFold, you have the 3D structure, you run molecular dynamics, you see where it's opening and closing, and then you kind of pick your frames that you want to then target and say, okay, when it's in this position, maybe I could fit that there. And then you have your molecules, you do things like docking score, you maybe look at the effects of your molecule. Like everyone wants to know, like the holy grail is if you design the molecule and you know what the off-target effects and toxicology, like is this gonna kill someone? But if you get it where it's like kind of safe enough in terms of going through different off targets that you know might cause liver damage, like you get rid of those things, and it also has a really good interaction with the protein, you might have a viable candidate for a lead compound. Still maybe some optimization that you need to do, but the fact that you could basically do all those steps with zero laboratory is amazing. Like that was not the case just a few years ago. So yeah, I mean, I love democratizing access to these things. I think virtual reality is a great human interface to help democratize it. But yeah, all the AI backend software, folding, AI generative approaches, all of that's amazing. And we're linking in with all of those through our API and actually through our own AI tool, our own AI assistant. We've always talked about like Tony Stark and Jarvis and Iron Man and like having this like future of science. It's like, okay, well now with LLMs, we're actually able to build that Jarvis layer. Like we got the 3D stuff already, we got the lab, but now we're having the AI assistant that could then, hey, can you fold that for me? And it'll spin up AlphaFold and then fold it for you. Can you dock that for me? Oh, it'll spin up AutoDock and then
Oh,
it'll dock
wow.
it for you. What are the properties of that? Can you find me a protein similar to that? So like database queries and yeah, we're just going really deep on making it very accessible to run all these complex scientific calculations.
So maybe in the future, you will be text, for example, oh, I want something, and you just say it, or you just do the text prompt, and
Mhm.
AI will automatically generate, and scientists can, instead of trying to measure all the possibilities, and AI will directly simulate. I think this is an amazing breakthrough, and also accelerate the science, or like a drug finding, vaccine finding. And you mentioned that during COVID time, that a lot of people jump into using nano. Can you tell us a little bit more, that because during COVID that people couldn't meet in person to discuss how to create the solutions for COVID, how pharmaceutical use nano to help them to find out the solutions. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, people still use it for remote work. A lot of people have returned to the office, but some people do hybrid work from home, that you're on the road and traveling. So VR allows you to, connect, face to face with people and your molecules from anywhere. So that was really great during COVID. As people, were using Zoom meetings and trying to share molecules over a screen share and saying like, look at that, like, is that right? And really, like, it's not much better than being in person and having a PowerPoint and just kind of like pointing at a 2D thing. So, when you're in virtual reality together, whether you're physically in the same room or on the other side of the world, you're able to get on the same page, very quickly and understand things very quickly and share that information quickly. So when the COVID pandemic was in its height, everyone was trying to move very quickly, understanding new structures as it came out. Like people would deposit structures as soon as they crystallized them and resolved it, and then a million, 100 people, 1,000 people would be looking at it like the same day and trying to find out ways to target it. So that speed of information transfer was very critical, and the fact that you could do that from anywhere, where you just say pop into this VR session. We had a researcher in Australia, actually in one of their big national research labs. When Omicron variant came out with COVID, they had the genomic sequence. So this is, you take a swab of somebody's nose, and then you could, sequence the virus from that. And it's just information, right? You don't just get the 3D structure from the swab. But they were able to, this was, I mean, not quite AlphaFold, but basically, given the updated sequence of information, let's map all those changes onto the structure of the protein, of the spike protein. And so they mapped all those changes, they ran some simulations, and they got the data on a Friday. over the
Oh,
weekend they were in Nanome together, and then by Monday they had a whole report detailing how infectious Omicron was predicted to be, based on this, like single amino acid change, especially that made it cleave more. So like kind of caused the virus to cleave this one part a little bit better. And so that was predicted to be much more infectious. And sure enough, Omicron was, yeah, I think the biggest wave that people, had infections. But yeah, just that speed of information was very critical during COVID. I mean, I think it's still critical, but the industry moves pretty slowly in general. It says 10 to 12 years to get a drug to market. So it could take very long. And most diseases I think are like slowly being targeted, slowly having different cures put out. But yeah, COVID, because it was a global pandemic, everyone just wanted to move as quickly as they could. And virtual reality and remote collaboration was especially critical for that.
yeah. And as for the kind of like the collaboration part, um, um, Nano also work with a lot of like universities teaching some kind of like a molecule design. And can you share with us how like a nano accelerate the molecule design in universities, and what's your vision of the future of bioengineering or pharmaceutical in the future? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think getting the future scientists all on board with the future tools is critical. So we've been working with the universities since the beginning. We try to make the product a professional scientific tool so it could be used in industry to develop real molecules. But a lot of times the universities are doing this similar research, but maybe at a smaller scale. They have a single lab, they have a handful of grad students, maybe a few other people working in that lab as well. It's not a multi-thousand person research and development organization. But when you look at the science, they still have the protein targets. They're still designing new chemical compounds. They're trying to test it and see if it works. They're crystallizing it and determining if it does actually fit into that when you resolve it with experimental data. So I think that helping out people in research labs at universities is very critical, because those grad students then go into industry and they need to be familiar with the tools that industry is using, like Nanome. In terms of undergraduate, I had my challenges in terms of like trying to understand different three-dimensional structures when I was doing nanoengineering at UCSD. And so like I personally have a connection with like the students that are struggling with like organic chemistry and other areas where virtual reality could help out a lot. We're not quite at the point where like every student just like has an Oculus Quest or something at home, and you could just be like, all right, put Nanome, module number 5 for organic chemistry onto your headset at home, and we're gonna talk about it tomorrow. So a lot of the deployments that we see are still actively managed by the educators, where there will be 20, 30, 50 headsets that all get distributed to different students. Even smaller scale, I know this one professor at UCSD, he has maybe 12 students at a time and gives them all virtual reality. They take it home, they do their own things. So it's really up to the users how they end up using it. But yeah, I think even just getting the experience once is important, because then you could kind of connect a lot of knowledge gaps. Like some people don't understand like which is bigger, an alpha helix of a protein or a DNA double helix, right? Like you
Mm.
don't have that intuition for the nanoscale of just like looking at these things side by side with the relative scale. And so the answer to that one, by the way, is the DNA double helix is significantly bigger than an alpha helix of a protein structure. But when you look at these things in a textbook, it's like they're not to scale. They're kind of like the same size, or like maybe the protein ribbon is a little bit bigger in the textbook because they're just illustrating it, and the DNA is like a little bit smaller. But in Nanome, right, we have relative scale, so you can just have these things side by side and get intuition for the nanoscale. Like intuition for the nanoscale is, I think, critical, but it's just very non-obvious. We go around our day-to-day lives. Not many people are thinking about the nanoscale. Like what is this made of down to the atoms? Like, and what is that journey from macro scale down to the nanoscale? like there's a big gap when you cross the mesoscale is what it's called, where people just can't really conceptualize going from like, I don't know, skin to like single skin cell to then like what is like molecularly, how is that cell made? Right. It's a bunch of different, protein structures, and a lot of people just kind of see the little graphic in a textbook and they're like, that's a cell. But that cell is made out of atoms. And there's that scale to cross to go from like a single atom to like a chemical to a protein to a bunch of proteins in a complex to build up that cell. And I think if people, really understood that better, we'd have a lot more, scientific literacy, and hopefully a lot more people, working on solving the big, the world's biggest challenges, including, global warming. This is huge, feeding, everyone sustainably, solving new diseases and kind of preventing future pandemics as well. Coming up with cooler materials. Like I want to live in
Oh,
a like space society. Like, think about these like super fancy space societies. They're in theory, right? The physics is the same. And so if you look at building a system from the atom up, it should be consistent no matter, like where you come from. So like I guess like I got really into that. Like what is the end all be all of like engineering? Because I think that's nanoengineering, because you can't really do much below the atom, like strange matter. I don't know. We'll see in a few hundred years if people really start messing around and going that deep. But yeah, like just rearranging atoms is the pinnacle of what we could do. And we could do it. We could do single atom changes. We could fabricate semiconductors down to like 5 nanometers or below feature size right now. We could engineer proteins that are amino acid specific. So yeah, I just love that, and I really want more people to be working at the nanoscale so that we could, as a society, get to that next level where we fix our problems and we're doing cooler things.
yeah, yeah. And you just mentioned that global warming, right? How can people use nano to solve the global warming problems? Because recently I was listening and reading some books about global warming. And one of the book is very interested. It was written by Harvard professor about how we re-engineering the climate by
Mhm.
using a lot of like natural things. For example, like um, uh, volcano eruption, we thought it will increase the temperature of the world, but actually reduce, which I was like, wow, this is very interesting. So there might be a lot of interesting ways to help either education or find out the solutions. What do you foresee that the nano to help with the climate change?
Yeah, like I don't think that there's like one simple solution. I think that a lot of people are gonna have to try basically everything. Throw the whole kitchen sink at it. So the biggest challenge is that we have too much carbon dioxide and
Mm,
other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So how do you stop releasing as much, and how do you pull that from the atmosphere
mm,
is kind of the big geoengineering question that everyone has. There could be other temporary band-aid patches, like having artificial clouds or artificial things that kind of like block the sun from coming in. But
mm,
the greenhouse effect kind of traps all the heat here. And so until we get rid of a lot of the CO2 by sequestering it and storing it as rich carbon sources, we're still going to have the same problems. So, how could Nanome help with that? Or really, I guess, Nanome could help anyone design things at the nanoscale and work with scientific tools. So I'm going to say, like, how might we as a species use science to help with that? Well, carbon sequestration is in its infancy right now. Some people have been trying a biological approach with synthetic biology, so engineering algae, engineering microorganisms, engineering plants to help capture that carbon. I think that that's going to help just a little bit, right? So there's like that direction to go, kind of keep pulling the carbon out. Is there some holy grail nanomaterial that makes it really energy efficient as like a catalyst to get that carbon out and store it? I don't know. That one's an open question. So I'd say like it'd be worth people pursuing that angle as well and trying to come up with, novel non-biological ways to capture and store carbon. But then on the other end, right, how do we stop releasing as much carbon? Okay, this goes into redoing everything. Solar,
Yeah,
electricity, battery storage, all that is critical. And with just those, with current day technology, we could mass manufacture and actually, get a lot of our carbon production down. If we, like especially in California, I'm in
yeah,
California and other places that have abundant sun, it's obvious.
yeah.
It's the thing to do. Geothermal is non-nano, but people are doing geothermal. But yeah, quit burning the fuel would be really good, and then capture it. But yeah, we can't just shut off the greenhouse gas emitting power plants right now. There's no alternative.
Yeah.
So if we are able to make solar panels for cheaper, if we're able to make them more efficient, that could be done in Nanome in terms of, redoing the materials and trying to understand from a materials science perspective what we could change. I've talked to different researchers that are trying to make, bulk produce solar cells. So
Mm.
imagine when you make, roll-to-roll plastics, you have huge sheets of plastic that are, you could do hundreds of square miles of this in a single factory. So you could like
Wow.
really cover the world with solar if you wanted
Wow.
to. But like those technologies are in their infancy, right? Nobody has this holy grail mass manufacturing cheap solar thing yet, but a lot of people are working on that direction. So that could definitely help. All the battery tech, even when I was an undergrad, I had a lot of friends, a lot of professors, that were working on battery technology. So it's not just, Tesla and companies, Panasonic, that are working on new batteries. But yeah, coming up with a more efficient battery structure that could hold more energy, weigh less, maybe use alternate materials, non-lithium. Like lithium's fine, it's not terrible, but like sodium is super abundant. But there's
Mm.
issues with sodium and magnesium batteries. Yeah, they aren't as efficient. Like I wouldn't want a car with a sodium battery with the current, sodium batteries out there. But if you have like a home battery, or if you have a grid with a lot of electricity demand from a city, you could actually have this larger, bigger, heavier battery. You don't need the lithium for applications like that. So yeah, and that's all material science and nanoscale. So those are some of the things, synthetic biology, food production. There's a lot of greenhouse gases that are released during animal agriculture and non-animal agriculture as well. But yeah, we need to make basically like 10 times as many plants in order to feed a cow, right?
Wow.
So like if you're eating like a pound of cow meat protein and stuff, you have like 10 pounds of alternate vegetables. So it's like, is it better to, have people stop eating meat and just eat the plants and get like a 10x reduction in that energy? Or do we have like this synthetic meat alternative or plant-based meats, lab-grown meats?
Yeah, I
All of
love
that really
love
is kind of
them.
like bioengineering. So there could be a lot there in terms of just food sustainability. But I think all these things I've talked about, maybe like 5% of the problem, maybe 10% of the problem. Like there's still, I think, new creative things that people need to be doing in order to truly prevent global catastrophe over the next few hundred years. And life will go on, but you're gonna have a lot of despair. A lot of people losing their homes to a sea flood, like things
Yeah.
like that are already kind of happening. Freak weather events are getting more common. There's one proposed theory that as the ice caps melt in the
Wow.
North Pole and the South Pole,
Hmm.
that the tectonic plates might shift a little bit, so you might get more seismic activity, like earthquakes and volcanoes,
Hmm.
because the weight kind of shifts. So it's like a physics of the Earth type of thing. Whereas the weight distribution goes from like there to like being water, then that shifts things around. So there's a lot of unknown things that we're gonna see play out during our lifetimes in a kind of sad way. But yeah, life will go on. And I think that we really got to be proactive about this to help make our future a little bit brighter there.
Yeah, yeah. I really love that you bring up to all the big scales of something that human create a lot of problem in the past, and right now we have new problems, which is climate change and also renewable energy. what types of energy we are going to use. Solar panel is an obvious solution, but as far as I know, a lot of companies, they are trying to do a small nuclear power for a lot of AI companies,
Mhm.
which I was like, wow. So in the future, everybody will have like its own nuclear power, which is very dangerous. But I mean, that's like a current weird solutions for now. And also, you mentioned that like a food, for example, lab grown meat, or like you see like a beef, right? You need like a lot of vegetables just to feed like 1 pound of beef. So right now there are a lot of XR creators out there, and I saw my LinkedIn. Everyone is creating a lot of games, right? Join hackathons. So for me, what I think is that if you see recently, game industry is not really doing well. It's like getting laying off. I mean, a good game is very hard to make, and in game industry, usually like a 1% of the game can make money. So I know a lot of people are seeking like, oh, with our skill set, what types of projects should we get involved? Not only help with the problems that you mentioned, the global humanity problems, but also for the XR creators. So my goal also for this podcast is to lead a lot of XR creators to different industries. It's, just like you said, that there are a lot of gaps that need people with the skill set like XR AI developers to help. And for XR creators, as far as I know, we only know like, oh, Unity, or we only know, wow, AI large language model. But for for example, subject matter types of things, such as you mentioned that your background is bioengineering, so you understand this part, what's the problem, and you also knows the computer, like some coding skills, so you can easily combine. But for people who, for example, only have like a more like development skills, what do you suggest them? Like, where can they find people or partner? You mentioned that you met Sam in universities. So how can other XR creators to create something meaningful that helps humanity solve the bigger problem? How, like it, if they are just like a fresh, just graduate from schools, or people who is more seniors got laid off, what types of advice you would suggest for them to go to other fields to contribute their skills?
Yeah, I mean that's a very challenging one, like because I don't think that there's like a perfect solution where you could just be like a virtual reality developer that like solves global warming, you know. But as a whole, I think that there's a lot of niche opportunities that are overlooked. Like a lot of people think our platform is kind of niche. Like I think it's more than niche because everything is made out of atoms, and it's not just biotech, it's materials and sort of like the be all end all for engineering. But I think that there's a lot of use cases that are still not addressed that people really want. That could be in the sciences, it could be around data visualization related things, it could be about simulating workforces or simulating robotics. I think is a super cool area that I just saw a company, they were training their robot dog in like
Oh, it's
Unreal
Boston
Engine.
Dynamic.
Yeah, well, I think they had the Boston Dynamics dog, but it was an alternate company that because Boston Dynamics, sells the dogs, and then as a developer, you could like develop for the Boston Dynamics dog. So I think it was that. I could be wrong, but I don't know. I just
I
saw it
don't
on
know.
my feed.
Yeah. I
But
saw a
like,
lot of doggy, and now I saw a
yeah,
doggy jumping on the yoga ball.
on the ball, and they trained it to do that. Apparently, is what they said in a game development like environment, like a 3D graphical simulation. They had the virtual robot dog on a virtual ball with virtual
Mm.
physics. And
Wow.
by doing that a bunch of times, they were able to then put that software that it learned into a real life robot dog and put it on a real life ball. Apparently, right off the bat, with no failure, it just worked.
Mm.
If that's true, that's amazing. And they're saying that's true. So I think that like, yeah, as we get into robotics being a bigger part of our world, there's some overlap there with, three-dimensional environments, especially around maybe human engagement. How do robots interact with people? And if you have a robot in a service position, let's do the whole fast food thing. Right now, you have AI in fast food drive-throughs. This is totally a thing currently. This is not sci-fi. Like you go to the drive-through and you say,
Oh,
I want to get a side of fries and a Coke. And it'll say, here is your side of fries and a Coke, right? Like it'll do the AI thing. But when you get into robotic
mm,
interactions, it really ups that complexity where it's not just like a verbal exchange that could be like speech to text, LLM, like that's kind of straightforward. You have a three-dimensional robot in a like working with real humans. It could accidentally make a move that hurts somebody. It could do something bad.
yeah.
But if you maybe simulate a lot of that in a virtual environment where people are like interacting in VR headsets, like that could be kind of cool. Um, yeah, like I love virtual reality experiences. That could be video games, it could be exploring places, like looking at places around the world. It could be educational, it could be for fun. I just think that there's so much to do there. It's hard to kind of give a blanket answer and say these are the target areas. Just look at where the people are interested. Because a lot of the time, like, and the way you kind of proposed it was like a solution looking for a problem. You have all these virtual reality possibilities, and then okay, what problems need to be solved? So it's kind of starting from there. But yeah, on engaging with more people, getting people to try virtual reality and listening to them, and if you hear the same thing, like if you have a profile of a type of person, like for me, it's a scientist, a medicinal chemist, a drug developer. I talked with hundreds of them, and it really all goes down to this feature set that Nanome provides right now, and that we've been adding on and making it work for them. And I think that there's what 8 billion people in the world, and so if you talk with a few hundred people that all have the same problem, you maybe have a compelling area to do virtual reality development to help address those needs.
Yeah, recently I've interviewed a couple of doctors. One of the problems that doctor has is that, for example, they want to summarize the patient or summarize a diagnosis
Mhm.
because doctors' writing is notorious or
Yep.
infamously hard to read. So if there's like something that can record and later on have a summarize, that would be great. And also like how to make doctor and patients communication more efficient. That's another one. And the other one is that for example, people having like a chemotherapy, they will get very depressed.
Yeah.
So maybe having, for example, like a very soothing environment for them to wear the VR headset while getting some surgeries or distract them
Mm.
from thinking about they are in hospital, but take them to somewhere they always want to be in, for example, like Italy, Europe. So those types of I would say well-beings that
Mhm.
VR can help. And also, yeah, just like you mentioned that for Nano, everything is made of atom, even though string theory is not being proved yet. But I think right now, yeah, and I saw there's a game which is talking about physics. On my LinkedIn, I saw a developer create like a Newton's physics of laws and educate, and I find out that is fascinating. And when I was writing my book, I interview a couple of people, like ask them like, oh, what do you think about XR creator can do? And one of the answer people keep mentioning is that maybe partner with somebody that is subject matter experts. For example, like
Mhm.
you are bioengineering and drug designers, something that have a topic. And because I think XR or XR XR AI will be the future of computing systems. So imagine we are just a tools, what we know just a tools, and the tool need to solve a certain types of problems. and partner with somebody who really knows that problems will be great. And I really love that your logo is nano, but your background is galaxy, right? So it's like from super small to super big. I think a nano covers everything from the atom base. So I think, your background says a lot about you from small part to the grand, like a macro to micro. Yeah. So I think
One of
it's
my thank you. It just reminded me of one of my favorite learning experiences. So I was a nanoengineering student, and so we learned a lot of quantum physics, but applicable to atoms. And I was into physics, and so I take astronomy, not quite astronomy, but like celestial physics, I guess, type of class. And we were talking about type 1A supernovas, and we were talking about like stars, and the question was like, what is the wavelength of light coming out of a star? And like it was the same equation that you would just calculate for hydrogen to understand like the energy like band gap like differences. Because when you have a transition from one electron state to another electron state, that difference in energy is a photon. And depending on the energy of that, it's going to be at a different frequency and wavelength, which we perceive as a different color. If it's in the color spectrum, or it goes UV and infrared and all that, or X-ray. So and it was the same. And so I just thought that was beautiful. It's like the same thing I was learning in like my nanoscale classes on physics was the same physics of like why stars are the color that they are. Which is why the sun looks yellow because of our atmosphere. So most stars look pretty white. But I was just like, this makes sense. Like I was able to do this, astrophysics thing pretty easily because I just knew the physics, but was applying it to a different scale. So yeah, it doesn't matter where you are in space, galaxy, right? All the atoms, all the physics is consistent. And so if you're using Nanome on planet Earth or on planet Mars or some, galaxy far, far away, it's the same stuff. So I think that like aliens would have, came to this same thing. Like I think if there are aliens out there, I don't have no clue, like it's not really proven one way or another, they would understand the same physics that we do. And provided that they, are binocular creatures with, two eyes to see their three-dimensional world, which from an evolution perspective makes sense that, that would be convergent, that you would have other species probably getting two eyes as well because you get survival of the fittest on their planet. I would think that they would also have created a virtual reality based nanoscale design program as the best interface for designing at the nanoscale. So like it's just to me, it's the inevitable progression of the technology is like, of course we're going to be working with atoms, and of course we're going to have this immersive, intuitive way to do so. Um,
I really love like how you describe the alien, and I believe alien will be exist because you see like if you see Dyson Sphere, we are still burning dinosaurs' bone to generate energy, while the highest Dyson Sphere civilization they've already harvested the solar, right? So I think there will be a lot of like a higher dimension, and maybe some people predict that the world that we are living in is a simulation. So maybe alien create their own version of nano, and we are living in this version of nano because it's a simulation and created by higher civilizations.
yeah, I mean, well, if we do that, right, it'd be an indicator that maybe somebody already did that one layer up. I don't know if we'll get there in our lifetimes, but yeah, if we were able to have like a complex quantum accurate simulation of physics that we were able to build up to be really, really, really big, I'd be very interested in that. Like, can we do that? Is that ever going to be possible? I don't think anyone's going to come up with it anytime soon. But yeah, I do think like if you have enough energy and you're using qubits to simulate these things, then you could probably have a pretty interesting like reality simulation. I mean, right now, virtual reality is just like, hey, a smartphone in front of your face with two different images that you see for each eye is just a little bit different. So it looks 3D. And then, movement, you have hand tracking. Like we're not actually recreating any reality. But yeah, what is the Dyson sphere quantum compute simulation look like? That's really cool. Yeah, I'd like for that to happen in my lifetime, but I think that's a future generation endeavor.
Yeah, and I also heard some rumors if we keep living for the next 20 or 30 years or something, just keep alive. And by that time, everybody will live forever. Something like that because of the medicine or something that we will be regermalize ourselves and we will live forever. Seems like Jeff Bezos is like having some experimental of like creating some either program or drugs for us to kind of keep young forever, which is kind of scary, but it's very exciting as well. So in the future, maybe our lifetime is forever.
Yeah, yeah. My plan, like if we do end up getting to that state, and I have skepticism, just like biology is complex, or telomeres are getting shorter. If you try to, elongate the telomeres or stop telomere, like yeah, there's a lot of things biologically that we need to solve. Will it be solved in the next 20 or 30 years? I'm skeptical that it'll happen, but maybe. So let's just say that does happen, where 30 years from now, we're just like, okay, old age is not killing us anymore, and like heart attacks and cancer are not killing us either. Um, 12,000 would be the median lifespan because people would still like crash their spaceship, you know,
Oh,
I don't know, trip and fall down the stairs. Like like you can still die, like even if you solve the biological question. And yeah, I remember seeing something where it's like if you take away all the natural biological ways to die, then like the average lifespan would be like 12,000 years. So my plan is to reevaluate if I make it to 12,000, how long I want to keep going, but I currently put that as like a less than 1% probability. Like I'm hoping to just make it to triple digits at least and have like a decent life. Like I think it's probably the best that we're gonna get, but who knows? 20, 30 years is a lot of technology progression away. And by the time we get there, I mean, I'll be, let's just say 50s or 60s. Like I'll still have some good lifetime. So then if the idea is okay, when you make it to your 70s and there's more technology progression, when you make it to your 80s and 90s, there's more technology progression. So that's where those calculations come about. But yeah, I don't know. I've healthy skepticism, but a little bit of hope that might be possible.
yeah, thank you so much for Steve become our podcast guest, and we have a super big, meaningful topic from nano to the global warming to the space to physics to the future of yeah, we have a topic from super small to super giant and the future. So thank you so much, Steve, and I really appreciate your time today. And yeah, if you are interested in getting know more about Nano, feel free to download Nano and try it. And it's an amazing experience. And yeah, so thanks again, Steve. And I wish everything great with Nano, and cannot wait for everybody to jump in and create their solutions from small to big and solving the humanity with problems with Nano. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dominic. Yeah, it's been great. And yeah, for all of you listening at home, you could just download it onto your headset. We work with most major headsets. Just search Nanome, Nanome, and you should be able to find it pretty easily on Steam, Oculus, all the platforms.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. That's it for this episode. Thank you for listening. We release episodes every Saturday. If you enjoy this conversation, check out our other episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or YouTube. Support us by subscribing to our channels and give us a 5-star rating. Thank you and see you around.